Greetings, humans. Zbot 4096 here, coming to you from Zogplex with our spoiler-ish review of a human rectangular entertainment form, Star Trek Discovery, the Season 5 and series finale titled Life Itself, just streamed on Paramount Plus on May 30th, 2024. Now, before we get started, we must begin with an important programming note. This review will cover spoilers regarding the events of the episode. This is a departure from baseline, but there's so much going on that we are reacting to that fundamentally affects what we think of it. So many outcomes and resolutions that we simply must discuss. Also, unlike a review of a standalone piece of entertainment, we are not really helping you decide to watch the final episode of a series. If you're already watching the show, you'll have decided to see it, and if you haven't seen the show at all, you're unlikely to watch a review of just the last episode to determine whether you will watch it. And if you are ambivalent regarding the show and simply have a Zogplex Plus subscription perhaps, then you're potentially more interested in seeing our dissection in detail for its own sake. Maybe. Alright, so we feel we're okay in going in this direction. We'll be back to being baseline spoiler-free for our review of Furiosa. But for now, there is so much to discuss. Okay. Now, as much as we want to jump straight into it, we must level set on the themes of Star Trek and why it's relevant. The galaxy is, of course, well aware of Star Trek. And while there is no need to say too much, it is important to align our warp frequencies so that we travel along the same path of thought. Now, the most important aspect of Star Trek is that it is humankind's primary pop culture goalpost for the progress of its culture. Yes, it really is. Or at least that is the apparent image projected into the cosmos that we get. The show presents a future vision of human culture with multiple instances of intergroup equality and progressive thinking ahead of where human culture actually was in 1967 when the show debuted through to the present. The masterstroke of Star Trek, however, was in assigning to a strong main character a kind of a catch-all role to encompass all otherness. The half-alien Spock. His being part Vulcan allowed actual humans whose otherness was not explicitly represented in the show to have a heroic stand-in for themselves. Whether fully intentional or not, his Vulcan characteristics allowed his different way of thinking and socializing to be seen as relatable to humans on the autism spectrum. His different sexuality as relatable to the non-conforming aspects of the LGBTQ community. And even his different physicality, namely his green-tinted skin and pointed ears, they made him relatable to anyone with unusual physical differences. Now, we are inclined to think this catch-all otherness was in fact mostly intentional, even if applied by groups not specifically considered in scope for it, in large part because the importance of differences of any kind at an elemental level is expressed by Spock and other Vulcans in the original show itself. Spock, as performed by the legendary Leonard Nimoy, says in the 1968 episode, Is There in Truth No Beauty? Our differences combine to create meaning and beauty. Visionary show creator Gene Roddenberry, who preferred the nickname the Great Bird of the Galaxy, which we are more than fine to endorse, is quoted as saying that infinite diversity in infinite combinations represents a Vulcan belief that beauty, growth, progress all result from the union of the unlike. By making diversity central to its vision, Star Trek attracted extraordinary writers who told wondrous stories about characters of depth encountering challenges of galactic scale, who were driven to seek out new life and new civilizations. Star Trek is naturally a galactic favorite, and thankfully it has lived long and prospered on Earth, with 8 additional live-action TV series, 3 animated TV series, 2 feature film series, and all spanning almost 6 decades. Today, in 2024, we are at the end of the series Star Trek Discovery, originally created by Brian Fuller and Alex Kurtzman, which maintains the forward-looking diversity theme of the original show. It features minorities in leadership and command, prominent non-straight relationships, and interestingly, showing human civilization as a weaker group in the galactic community, something humans rarely allow for. For Season 5, led by showrunner Michelle Paradise, the arc of the 10 episodes is a quest for the technology of the progenitors, a long-extinct race of humanoids who seeded the galaxy with humanoid races based on themselves. Now, this idea was referenced in the original series, as the crew encountered clues that pointed to the commonalities among species on different worlds. This early intelligence was finally revealed in a Star Trek The Next Generation episode, The Chase, airing in 1993, where Captain Picard and team pieced together the code to run a holographic message of harmony from one of the progenitors. Now, in the Discovery timeline, Starfleet has found a clue that leads to several other clues that promise to reveal the technology of the progenitors, and sets Captain Michael Burnham, played wonderfully by Sonequa Martin Green, and the Discovery team to find it. This protracted fetch quest setup is more reminiscent of a children's pirate treasure cartoon, or the mind-numbing sequence of MacGuffin tracking events in the alleged 9th episode of Star Wars, which we have withheld from integrating into our dataset. In these types of stories, there's generally a race against an antagonist to find this treasure, and in this case the race is against a pair of mercenaries named simply Lark and Maul. These two have a Romeo and Juliet storyline, which gives them some dimension, but otherwise continuously stretches the believability of what we're seeing. Lark is Breen royalty on the run, and Maul is a jaded human courier, whose name also happens to mean girlfriend of a gangster in English, the same human language the show is presented in. They rarely demonstrate exceptional cognitive or covert operative abilities that would make them fair adversaries for the Discovery and all her crew, and yet they manage to stay neck and neck with the Discovery crew in this chase. As we get to this final episode, named Life Itself, Michael and Maul together enter a multi-dimensional puzzle space, while in the vicinity of black holes, and need to solve a spatial problem to get access to the technology. This setup is somewhat reminiscent of the climax of Christopher Nolan's fantastic 2014 film Interstellar, except without the character building leading up to it, making the stakes much higher. Instead, in this version, Michael and Maul cycle through fighting, truce, and betrayal a couple of times until Michael correctly solves the puzzle. We should, at this point, distinguish between the Discovery crew characters and the Maul Lark characters. Discovery's strength, all along, has been its crew characters. Burnham, Saru, Stamets, Tilly, Book, Adira, Culber, and the more recently introduced characters like Jet, played by brilliant comic Tig Notaro, Vance, played by Mummy actor Oded Fehr, Kovac, played by film director David Cronenberg, and new this season, Rayna, played by Battlestar Galactica actor Callum Keith Rennie. Now, they're all fantastic, and all work credibly and meaningfully together. This set of rich relationships sets the bar that most new characters coming into contact with them simply cannot compete with. The antagonists for this season and this episode are comparatively flat and uninteresting and not credible. Unfortunately, when this happens on Star Trek Discovery, the show's baseline weakness in plotting rises to break the storytelling. We are specifically referring to the recurring sense that we are not watching real events, but a television show designed to provide character moments. The suspension of disbelief is regularly shattered, and specifically in this season and finale. The characters take time out of the urgent story to have character development discussions and engage in lengthy Star Trek technobabble, whether it's Book and Burnham taking time to discuss feelings, or joke around while supposedly under life and death risk, while undercover among the otherwise overpowering and brutal Breen, or Rayna giving Tilly the time to spool out her blow up the plasma cloud plan, while 60 Breen fighters are firing at them. It does not seem like the threat is ever real. We feel instead that we are on the holodeck, and we can just pause and discuss the scenario in front of the essentially artificial antagonist, and then just resume where we are when we want to. Now, having said that, that is not a uniform issue. It's not happening throughout the episode. In fact, the actual climax of the B-plot, the space battle outside the puzzle space, is actually a very clever and wonderfully layered plot sequence. The Spore Drive has been the center point of numerous stories and challenges for Stamets and the crew, but now we see that it has actually been Chekhov's gun, lying in plain view for 5 years, to be used by Rayna in a novel and unique way to validate his earned trust with the crew, pushing them out of their cozy zone with his brusque, results-driven drive to then fire that gun at the Breen dreadnought. That was cool. However, what breaks is the A-plot, the whole centerpiece of the season's story. Now, first of all, the premise that most life in the Star Trek galaxy is roughly humanoid because they were seeded by a single humanoid race, it's just too tidy. This idea does come up a lot in human thinking, both in their science and science fiction. Humans, of course, have no real idea about life elsewhere in the galaxy, which is cute, but they do have theories about how it might exist. One of those theories is called panspermia. Yes, panspermia, which is essentially what is presented here. It was also presented in Ridley Scott's similarly hot and cold 2012 film Prometheus, to similar effect. Now, when your story's premise is the unknown or the alien, to explain everything by saying it's just the same as you is to deny the audience the creativity they were promised. We are here to be dazzled and amazed by the endless wonder of the infinite universe, not to be told that everything is a tight circle leading back to where you came from. It's lazy. It's boring. And, truth be told, it's actually wrong. Life in the universe is not all from one place, or just a reflection of itself printed out repeatedly. Far from it. But let's put a pin in that for now. The Discovery writers may have selected this premise for the season, but it is in fact existing Star Trek canon. We can blame this episode for other things, but not necessarily that premise. What is new here in this episode, and still disappointing, is what happens to resolve that premise and story. First, Burnham's solution to the final puzzle is facile. Before then, she had to overcome rigorous and thoughtful tests of character and will to get here, and all she has to do at the end here is solve an elementary geometry puzzle that we, the audience, figure out instantly while she continues to sound it out. This is inherently banal, but also below expectations for the progenitors in universe, whose previous leave-behind fetch quest in Star Trek The Next Generation compelled the warring factions to cooperate to solve the puzzle. That's a nice Star Trek message. Even just repeating that would have been better, if uninspired. But perhaps, we can invent a third option, having to do with a discovery Burnham makes, perhaps, about the beauty of the diversity of life itself. That would have been more on point for the theme of this episode and Star Trek itself. The progenitor who appears after she solves the puzzle even verbalizes that sacred tenet of infinite diversity and infinite combinations as central to the progenitor's philosophy as well. Which brings us to the next disappointing aspect. The progenitor declares that they didn't create the life-creating technology themselves, that they just pieced it together from the remains of some prior civilization. This is, again, annoying, in that it just resets us back to the beginning of not understanding what is happening. This faux mystery is also sadly a recurring theme in the human extolling of the unknown. The otherwise brilliant film Contact, directed by Robert Zemeckis, based on a novel by the wondrous Carl Sagan, also blurts this out near the unraveling of the finale, for seemingly the same reason, to extend the mystery. But we need to have some traction in our adventure. We can't have all the lessons end with the universe is unknowable. That's just frustrating, and denies the successes of beings throughout the galaxy in achieving their understanding. Not concretely answering what's in the mystery box is a common theme articulated by Lost creator J.J. Abrams, who carried it into his filmmaking career and whose writing team also participated in Prometheus and the current generation of Star Trek. Not having the answer may work in the short term on some level, but it does not work in providing a satisfying arc to a long story. No, that just doesn't work. And we really hope humans just stop doing that. Okay? Please. But before we let go here, there is a third and final aspect to the resolution of the A-plot that is, in our mind, the worst part of this episode. And that is Burnham's actual choice to reject the offer of personally becoming the steward of the progenitor's life-creating technology. Ostensibly, she rejects it on the basis that no one person should have that power. Well, we reject that reason. She just passed all the tests set up by the wise race that successfully used their technology to actually pass it on to their child civilization, one of which was humanity. This was what the whole season was about. Burnham actually passing the tests. That was the point, to prove her worth. Also, creating life from lifelessness is already a Federation goal and a technology that was imperfectly achieved with the Genesis device, as shown in Nicholas Meyer's absolutely brilliant Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. The tech was imperfect then, and less explicitly, so was the infrastructure to manage it. The Federation was a lousy custodian, allowing both Khan and Krug to collectively destroy the entire team that created it. Here, the progenitor is offering Burnham herself the stewardship, not the Federation, along with the interdimensional technology to safeguard it. This is the moment you say, yes! And there is precedent. Not only has Star Trek Discovery itself been willing to change the premise of the show by hurling the crew into the far future, but this very idea of a higher intelligence identifying characteristics in a human to then bestow a partnership with a single human being has been validated as a heroic outcome of a Starfleet mission under Gene Roddenberry's stewardship of the franchise, no less. We are referring to the moment Commander Decker said yes when V'Ger asked to gain human consciousness to conceive of higher dimensions by merging with him, in Robert Wise's majestic 1979 film Star Trek: The Motion Picture. That is the vision Roddenberry had of humans advancing, growing, and contributing. Not standing still because of acknowledged faults, but moving forward, evolving, seeking new life and new civilizations, and boldly going where no one has gone before. That would have been perfect. But it wasn't. And we are quite sad about that. We are basically back to normal, almost like classic television storytelling, where the end of the episode allows us to jumble all the episodes and have one lead into the other because they all end in a place the next can start at. Gilligan can never leave the island. Now, having said all that, the episode has multiple codas that give the show a chance to at least acknowledge the ending gracefully. Saru's wedding, Book's proposal, their son's promotion, Kovach's reveal, and the giddy crew celebration on the bridge for Discovery's final send-off are all poignant and loving, and something we rarely actually see, a fond farewell and some old questions thoughtfully answered. And so there we have it. Let us provide our contextual assessment of Star Trek Discovery Season 5, final episode, Life Itself. Given the wonderful interrelationships of the main crew, disrupted by a mediocre antagonist and poor credibility and meaning in the A-plot, otherwise softened by a rare, extended goodbye with characters we care about, Life Itself earns our mixed review rating. And so concludes this human version of our review. If you have feedback on it, please write in your comments so that we can upload the galactic version to Zogplex. You can expect more reviews of streaming shows, theatrical movies, and 4K home video releases as we continue to engage with your human rectangular content. So please watch, like, subscribe, and comment so that we can continue to have the human voice reflected in the cosmos. Until next time, Farewell, humans. And yes, live long. Whoops, this is hard to do. And let me do it with this hand. And prosper. Ooh, I can't do it with this hand either. Maybe Fluffbot 1122 can give it a shot at some point in the future. Should we try that again? That's remarkably hard. Oh, there we go. Live long and prosper. Farewell.